Andy, James, thanks so much for doing this. So we as a whole community are wanting to prioritize prayer in this season. So we kicked off the autumn term with our week of prayer. We're going to be teaching into prayer up until Advent. We're writing songs about prayer as well. Um, I guess I wanted to kick off, James, by asking you, why do we feel this invitation for us to prioritize prayer right now?
Yeah. Um, well, I think it's really important to say that this has always been God's invitation towards His people, right from the beginning. If we understand prayer in its simplest form to be us in conversation with God, it's always been His longing. So there's probably nothing special or significant about the timing of it. However, that being said, I do think this is an opportunity and a moment for us to reorientate ourselves and to reprioritize prayer and put it in its rightful place. And I think just picking up on a corporate level, but also on a personal level, being in conversation with people in our community, prayer is something that people are struggling with, but they want to lean into more.
Yeah.
So I think that's probably one of the reasons why we're doing it. We're listening to what people are saying, and kind of what we're sensing is that we want to create more opportunity for people to pray. But also I think it's important to say that you can't look at the history of the church and not see where every significant move of God has taken place, prayer being directly correlated to that. And I think if we want to see this valley come alive and for God's kingdom to come in its fullest measure on our watch here, I think we need to be a people that pray. And just looking at that rhythm through history, I think it will repeat itself. And there is a sense of that happening already at the minute across the UK and the world at the minute. As people are praying, they're beginning to see God move in ways they haven't seen before. So yeah, and I suppose maybe just to round that up, the text that I've been sitting with, and that is that Second Chronicles. If my people who call by my name pray, I will hear them and I'll heal their land. So if we were to see the restoration, the renewal, and the healing of all things in the valley area, I think it's going to be through prayer. So I suppose that's why we're doing it, to contend for the more that God has for us.
That's great. Thank you. Like, this might be the most obvious question, but like, what is prayer? Like, if you were to, it may feel a little bit like asking fish to describe what water is, but particularly for some of us that are maybe near to faith, um, we've heard about prayer a lot. But like, what actually
I mean,
is your working definition of what
I
prayer
think
is?
that question is rooted in the why people feel like they're bad at it, because I don't think we know really what it is.
Right.
Or we live with this kind of, I don't know what's in our imagination when we think about what a good or a healthy prayer life is. We maybe rewind 1,500 years and have little beehives that we all retreat to for 16 hours a day to contemplate and pray. And if that's your life, then you're kind of you're smashing it. And I think that's partly why we want to do this, of helping people understand when we talk about being a community that prays, what that actually means. And like for me, like it's the simplest thing of I suppose I think there's like two sides to it, of communion and commission. And the is really important in both of those kind of ideas, that like prayer is something we do with God, but prayer is not something that's like hidden in a room only. That if our prayer life isn't leading us into the real world of broken humanity and community and neighborhoods and neighbors and family and friends, then it's useless. Like if your prayer life doesn't actually lead you to be a generative force in the world for good, then I don't care what your prayer life is.
Right.
Like, so that's where for me, like, I don't have like a 2 sentence definition of what prayer is, but like for me, it's about communing with God and commissioning with God. That's what prayer is. And neither are, it's neither one or the other.
Sure.
And I think those of us, like, I mean, this is a bit of a stereotype, but I think we are in general we'll have a lean to one or the other. You know, where some of us are slightly more contemplative and love the idea of a prayer room where we can stay all day. Others of us are slightly more activist oriented and we love to just get out of the room and go and do something. The danger for the contemplatives is they never actually do anything. The danger for the activists is it's everything in their own strength and striving, and you know, you end up burning out, or you know, you get a bit jaded because you try all these things and some of them don't work, and then God, where are you? I'm trying to like fix the world, and you know, whereas it's the co part for me is the really important thing. And so that's what, like, so for me, what is prayer actually? What is prayer? Well, it's conversations with Jesus. It's questions more than it's requests. But it's also then what I actually activate in my life and the decisions that I make. And, you know, the like sitting outside a neighbour's house recently and, you know, praying for help because, you know, an elderly parent was about to pass away and they've asked me to come and be around that and be involved in that. And it's like, well, okay, here I go, you know, Lord, help me to stay connected to you and listen to your voice and be some sort of person of peace in this whole kind of thing. Yeah. You know, so it's all of that, you know, and I think that, yeah, that for me is sort of my paradigm when it comes to prayer, you know, is that it leads me deeper into Jesus and deeper out into the world.
Yeah, it's really good. And it is, I think prayer ultimately does lead us back into the love of God and the love of neighbour. It's like it's a constant returning back to the greatest commandments that Jesus taught us. It's really helpful in terms of the Communion Commission frame, and also the different lanes that we have whenever it comes to prayer. And I think whenever we first get around prayer, whenever we first learn to pray, as you said, it's often a lot of demands that we make of God. It's a lot of, we bring our lists. We're like, God, would you answer this prayer, that prayer? And of course, petition is definitely a key part of prayer. Intercession is a key part of prayer. But there is a whole kaleidoscope of what a prayer life actually looks like. And James, I know for you, just as we've been chatting over the years about prayer, you've been kind of moving your way through the different kinds of prayer. They've kind of been unfolding and opening up for you as you've kind of grown up in the faith. Could you just describe a little bit of that journey? Like particularly, I guess, whenever you find yourself moving towards the more contemplative styles of prayer, I guess maybe growing up the kind of more, I guess, classical charismatic ways of praying would have been more of your lane, but you found yourself embracing some of the contemplative styles of prayer as well. Could you just share a little bit about that journey for you?
Yeah, no, for sure. Yeah, that definitely has been my journey. I growing up was very much formed in charismatic community and was at every meeting under the sun, prayer meetings that went on to 2 a.m. and definitely there was no space in any of those gatherings or spaces for contemplative prayer. It was the louder you prayed, the better. Right. And yeah, so that has kind of been my journey. However, over this past kind of 5 years, through study and kind of submitting myself to some spiritual direction, I've been on a wee bit of a journey of trying to understand other forms of prayer. And as I've done that, I've kind of picked up loads of things, but one of the things I've kind of bumped into is the Desert Fathers, these guys who were in the early church just frustrated at the state of the church and kind of fled to go and pray in all these kind of different forms, mostly contemplative ways, and they deemed silence as the highest form of prayer, which basically for them was coming from a place of actually when we use words, we're trying to craft these perfect prayers, and actually what we're doing is stumbling over our words and missing the point, which is what Andy said, you know, to commune with God. So anyway, I was on a bit of a journey around this about 4 years ago. Then Hannah and I were in Donegal, as we are a couple of times in the year, and it was really a trip for us. It was in October time for us not to enjoy the sun of Donegal, which doesn't really happen anytime. But it was a time for us. We wanted to go away and listen to God. So I had my guitar there, which is one of the ways I normally connect with God through prayer. I also had beautiful scenes around me and creation and stuff. But I was kind of like, okay, well, I'll give this. I was reading about the Desert Fathers. I'll give this silent prayer thing a go. So I lay down in the living room and told Hannah not to speak to me. And the first few minutes, just my thoughts were scattered. They were everywhere. And after about 5 minutes, began to just really sense the presence of God stronger and stronger. And then 5 minutes later went, and I just began to weep. And there was just something really, really deeply formational happening with me. And I was communing with the Lord without using words. I was praying without using words, which I didn't think was a thing. But from that moment on, from my experience of that moment, I began to realize, gosh, I have really missed out on something special here, you know. I thought you had to be in the loud meeting and you needed to pray loudly in order for God to hear your prayers, but actually this was a whole new thing that had opened up to me. And like the Desert Father said, silence is deemed to be the highest form of prayer. I was kind of like, gosh, I maybe see where these guys are coming from for the first time. So yeah, I suppose for me, to speak to your question of like the kaleidoscopic nature of prayer and my journey of moving more towards the contemplative, I think we have to be careful as charismatics, not to let our preference lead us in our way of prayer, because I think if that is to happen, we will miss out on a deeper communion with God that's available to us on the contemplative side, but also will be, I think, malformed. Like we'll actually miss out on the formational side of the contemplative prayer journey, and it's not contemplative versus charismatic. No. We need all these forms of prayer. Yes. But I do think for us, speaking on behalf of maybe the majority of people in our church who are charismatics, I think it's something that we do need to lean into more. Silent prayer, and I suppose we need to figure out what that looks like for us in our lives, but I couldn't encourage people more through my own experience.
It's really good. It's really good. And I think prayer is like a kaleidoscope, and I think particularly contemplative prayer, the more contemplative styles of prayer, they do lead us towards the journey of our formation. And yet, as you say, it's holding that intention with what you were saying earlier, Andy, of actually prayer also has to always be on to something. And our formation should always lead to the transformation of those around us and the places that we find ourselves in. Probably the framing moment in the life of Jesus for a lot of what we're going to be talking about is whenever he finds himself in the temple and he sees the state of what's going on there. He starts flipping tables, and then he pulls out some of the words of Isaiah by saying that my house, my temple, it is to be a house of prayer. And whenever you pull some of what Jesus is speaking about here through in the imagination of Paul, you find that actually the temple is no longer just a physical place that's rooted in Jerusalem. Actually, we, the church, are the temple of God. And also we ourselves as individuals filled by the Spirit, we're also temples of God too. And so we are wanting to prioritize what it looks like for us as individuals to be houses of prayer, but also for us as a community to be a house of prayer. And whenever it comes to us as individuals, like what does it look like for us to be a home, a house of prayer within ourselves? What does an individual, healthy, dynamic, powerful prayer life look like for us?
I mean, I think if you look at that text where gospel writers record that moment, I think what's really interesting in terms of the language Jesus is using is he's creating a dichotomy of like opposites. So he's saying like, you guys have taken what was supposed to be a place that held the presence of God for the world and made it a place of commerce for yourselves. So like that's where the rage comes from. Like it's not just like you're not praying enough. It's like an opposite spirit. Right. And like I think if you think of like the presence of God is for the transformation of the world, like that's what it's for. Yes. And therefore when we in New Covenant context become like mobile temples that carry the presence of God, That's for the transformation of the world. So if our prayer life is only onto our personal peace, then Jesus flips the temple over and goes, or the table over, and says, you don't, like, this is the opposite. And it's the kind of, I can't remember if we're going to talk about this later or not, but like the self-help kind of tsunami that is filling our podcasts and our social media feeds and our cultural imagination of like, how do I live at more peace with myself, and who can and what can help me live into that way, is actually the very thing that is making you anxious.
Right.
Because it's turned in on yourself. That's effectively what sin does. It turns us in on ourselves. And that's what Jesus is confronting. And so when Jesus says this is supposed to be a house of prayer, what he's saying is this is supposed to not be about self-interest and self-gain at the expense of others.
Yes.
Which is really funny, because like if you think of like what frustrates a contemplative prayer warrior, it's the interruptions of the world. It's like, well, maybe that's Jesus, you know, and not the devil. Because actually he's trying to form us in such a way that we embody his presence, his transforming presence for the sake of the world. So what does an individual house of prayer look like? Well, first of all, it looks like someone whose imagination and action and rhythm and habit is formed into, how do I join in with what Jesus is doing?
Yes.
Because Jesus is doing something in the world. And that's what our prayer life actually forms us into, rather than like, I'm stressed about my kids, I'm stressed about my life, I'm stressed about my health, I need to pray more. That's an inward, and it's not that, anyways, I pray about my kids, I pray about my health, you know, but like if that's the fuel for the fire, we've missed it. Like the fuel for the fire is the inbreaking reality of the kingdom that has so shaped our imagination that we are giving our lives selflessly and sacrificially for that. Knowing that we actually are in relationship with a good and beautiful God who loves us and identifies himself to us as Father, who cares about the things that worry us. But that's the order, as opposed to, now listen, this is really important, because we all come to Jesus through all kinds of routes and roads. And there are lots of us who've come to faith through our own personal tragedies and problems and all those sorts of things. So it's not to downplay that, but it is to help us understand what's God trying to do with us, which is fundamentally get us beyond our self-interest and self-worries and self-concerns. And so for me, what does it mean for me to be an individual house of prayer? I mean, I maybe get really, really repetitive, but it's about me embodying as best I can the presence of Jesus for the sake of the world. That's what it looks like. And I have a fairly profound awareness of the lack in my own self to do that. My own short-tempered times, my own ill-discipline at times, my what Jamie was talking about at the weekend there of, I don't do what I want, and I do what I don't want. Which is partly what throws me back on the grace of God in communion prayer all the time. Of flip sake, I missed that moment today, or I missed that opportunity to pray with that person today, or I reacted poorly there, or whatever that is. Lord, help me, and you know, and be with me and change me. And equally then, whenever there's stuff going on that you feel like you need to speak up and confront, or there's stuff you need to move towards that you feel like, I have no solutions here, but I know I need to go over there. I don't know what I'm going to do when I walk through that door, but I know I need to go walk through that door. And like, I think it was John Wimber said, like one of the prayers he prayed most often was help. Like that is like, I mean, just look at like the life of the disciples when Jesus ascended. Like they're just constantly in situations and scenarios that they're not qualified for, they've never seen before, they don't know what to do, but they knew what Jesus was doing, so we're like, well, I guess we're going over there today. And that's where I think prayer comes alive. You know, where we're like, flip, I'm doing this right now, or I'm making that phone call, or I'm giving that thing away, or like we're doing this with our finances. Gosh, really? Yeah, okay, Lord, help. That's where, you know.
And particularly the prayers of help, and what you're describing is, it's not communion and commission, it's actually, these are both happening at exactly the same time.
Well, that's what I mean by if you separate them, you become like it's really weird.
Yes.
Like it's not, doesn't make any sense, because you're effectively actually communing on your own and commissioning on your own.
Yeah, that's good.
Like the whole thing is it's with.
That's it.
You know, so like my communion with God is inseparable. You know, my communion is inseparable from my commission.
Yes.
They don't make sense, because, and again, this is if we see ourselves correctly, we are the mini temple, the mobile temple. Like that's what we are. We're mobile, like, and that's where I think, you know, I always think it's really funny when meet people and connect with people who are just coming towards faith. And there's just sometimes like, and you invite them maybe to church or to church gathering or that kind of thing, and there's that like, flip, I can't go in there, I'll go on fire. And I'm like, it's just funny to me. I'm always like, oh no, like, if you're worried about going on fire, you should be worried about going on fire right now, because the presence of God is in me and is all around you, rather than like thinking it's somehow housed in a ex-pet food warehouse.
Sure.
Like that's bonkers. Like the only reason why the presence of Jesus is anywhere near this is because we're all in it. Right. Otherwise, it's just bricks and mortar.
Yes.
You know.
100%.
Anyway, so I don't know if that answers the question, but that's what I think about around what does it mean to be a house of prayer ourselves. It's like, how do you follow Jesus and be anything other than that?
Right. No, I think it's really, really helpful. And James, just really briefly, whenever it comes to, obviously, we are, as individuals, mobile temples, but also we, the church, gathered, brothers and sisters gathering together, it's not about the building, but as the community of the saints. Like, what does it mean for us to be a house of prayer, collectively, corporately together?
Yeah. Well, like, firstly, I have to agree with Andy. Like, I think the house of prayer is, you know, as the church is, it's not made up of bricks, it's made up of people. But you can't also avoid the invitation in Scripture time and time again for the saints to gather and to pray together. In fact, I think it's in Hebrews, like that, like idea of like, don't neglect the gathering of the saints. When there's 2 or 3 gathered in my name, there I am. Like there's scripture after scripture to I suppose to kind of push us towards getting together as well. So there is the like being out there, the Brother Lawrence practicing the presence type prayer, you know, where we invite him into everything that we're doing. But there is moments, I think, where we have to get together and we have to pray together, you know. And I suppose to answer that question, like to see more prayer in this community, we probably need more rhythms and routines of getting together and doing that. But I think that's obvious. I think one of the things though that I really long to see happen, and for us to become a house of prayer in our gathered moments, corporate kind of spaces, is that we would move from being spectators to participants. And I think that's actually the key thing in order for us to see this fully active, alive in those more gathered environments. You know, it's very easy to come into one of our gathered environments where we are practicing prayer or whatever, and come and leave and not actually participate in any way, shape or form. And as I was kind of thinking about this conversation today, like, it just began to imagine, like, how different would our gathered spaces look if we all came with the idea that, like, what would it look like for me just to pray for one person here today? Like, how different and how much more would we see the flame ignited in people's hearts and in our own heart as we began to move from just spectating on a Sunday or in our gathered environments to actually participating and praying. And I think that's, for me, if we're to move towards becoming a house of prayer, I think that's the most important thing, and to challenge people in their tribes that don't just gather to come and receive prayer, but actually come and with the expectation that you're going to actually pray for someone, you know, or so that's kind of my challenge, and the thing I would love to see instilled over the next few months as we try to kind of go after this is let's really lean in and not be on the fringes and watch, but actually let's come with the expectation of God. What do you want to do today? How can I pray for somebody today? Really, you know, I think our environment would look very, very different.
Very much so. No, it's a really good challenge for us to end on. Les, thank you. And we're going to keep cracking on with this conversation in another video, but thanks for that. Really appreciate it.